présent.
you
D'abord,
now know
quelques éléments de
the
contexte.
mechanism. Here are a few elements of context. We are joined by Sebastian Troyer, Director General of IDRI, and Professor Okerere from the CCCD in Nigeria, who will be talking about the key figures of the challenges of SME financing in Africa. Let's listen to them.
L'OCDE chiffre à 170 milliards de dollars d'ici 2025 les besoins pour des investissements dans des infrastructures de qualité en Afrique. Ce qui est important de retenir, c'est que des infrastructures durables ou de qualité, c'est pas un surcoût. L'important, c'est de réussir à attirer les investisseurs sur des investissements de long terme que sont les infrastructures en général et aussi quand elles sont durables.
Africa's infrastructure investment need is humongous. The number is about 170 billion US dollars per annum. And only a fraction of this is currently being mobilized, with a financing gap of about $100 billion per year.
Ce que j'entends des partenaires africains, c'est que les infrastructures sont un élément clé d'une stratégie d'industrialisation du continent pour capturer des emplois et de la valeur sur le continent. Il faut donc que ces infrastructures durables proposées par l'Europe fassent de l'Afrique un acteur industriel clé de l'économie zéro carbone de demain, et par exemple en produisant sur place le ciment vert ou l'acier vert qui est nécessaire à tout ça.
To come up with new alternative model that has to be bolder, more inclusive, more forward-looking and more agile and responsive to Africa's need. And crucially, the new investment model has to be one that recognizes the need to move away from the emphasis on fossil fuel in the context of a global transition to the green economy.
Les exigences de durabilité ou de qualité sont en fait un surcroît de qualité et pas un surcoût. Mais comment prouver, comment mesurer que l'offre européenne n'est pas plus chère que les autres et qu'au contraire, elle est plutôt un pari sur des impacts à long terme en matière d'industrialisation, de transformation économique et de réduction de la pauvreté?
Well, a crucial question for participants really how to fill this huge financing gap in infrastructure investment in Africa. But also crucially how to do that in a way that doesn't just add to macroeconomic growth and more riches for the already rich people, but in a way that actually is more inclusive or that promotes inclusive green growth for Africa.
Cette rapide vue
So
d'ensemble de l'enjeu
much
que
for
représente le
this quick
financement
overview of the challenge of financing African SMEs. So let's measure how this translates into daily lives of young entrepreneurs on the continent with two Senegalese startups. First of all, Diko Si, who is the co-founder and CEO of Dictaf Corporation. Please join me on stage.
Diko Si, ça y est, je vous vois.
Diko Si, there you are.
Voilà, bonjour. Alors, juste un mot technique.
Just your mission, if you accept it, is to pitch your business. Tell us about the challenges, the support you've received. You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's more than I need. Hello, I'm going to talk about farming. Who is familiar with chibujen? It's the national Senegalese dish. Chibujen last year became part of the immaterial World Heritage of UNESCO on December the 14th. Once again, it became part of the UNESCO's World Heritage. It is one of the 3 best things I ever experienced, after Senegal, of course, winning the African Cup just recently. So what's the story about Djiboutian? Well, it's been a paradox. It's the national dish, but for many years, 90% of its ingredients were coming from outside of the country for many years. That was before. Why? Well, because people realized this and changed things. Let's go to the valley of the Senegal River. Women created small companies there to cultivate rice. And today, most of the rice consumed in Senegal is coming from these women. They are small farmers, they're strong, they're powerful, and they work hard to feed Africa. These women have a real impact on the Senegalese impact, but they deserve more. They could do so much more if we supported them. When I say support, I mean we need to reinforce their capabilities, their technical capabilities. We need to help them structure their organizations or companies, and we need to provide them with the financial support they need to target new markets beyond Dakar and beyond Senegal.
Je marche encore toujours et je pense encore au riz au poisson. C'est pas parce que j'ai faim.
So today's story is about rice and fish. The fact we became World Heritage was so important. So Djiboutian is not just rice and fish. You will also find vegetables. If you go to the Ndiaye region, which is near Dakar and more up north, this is an area where people tend to grow vegetables. It reminds me of Ousmane. Ousmane is a young Senegalese entrepreneur who wants to make a difference and allow ingredients to be grown locally. He decided to become a young entrepreneur and created his business. He had no funding. He turned to a bank, a regular bank, and he was asked the first year
trois états financiers
to give a bank history, a credit history, and a bank guarantee, which he did not have. And he had to demonstrate that he would be able to pay off his loan. So Ousmane at that point had two solutions: either stop, give up, or continue. This is where we step in. The state of Senegal has decided to intervene to make it easier for young entrepreneurs to become successful. Ousmane, once his problem was solved, had to face other problems, including technical problems. He did not have all the skills required to operate a farm. He didn't have the expertise. He was also struggling to sell and store some of his products. So this is where Dictaf comes in. Dictaf is the company that I'm a co-founder of. So what do we do at Dictaf? Dictaf provides advice, support, and monitoring, and digital solutions to allow Ousmane to better address his problems. We have an application called SOS Agri, which uses AI to address crop issues, crop losses, how do I better protect my crops, and so on. It's very simple. Ousmane takes a picture of a diseased plant. The app will diagnose, will tell him the name of the disease, what treatment he can use, and how he can eradicate this disease. And by doing so, he will protect his crops and hopefully get better yields.
And I was talking to you about rice earlier. We eat a lot of rice, we put it in Djiboutian. And Djiboutian is a story not just about rice, it's a story about entrepreneurship and self-sufficiency. Djiboutian represents self-sufficiency. Excuse me, madame. I am so sorry, but your time is up. I'll finish quickly. I was going to say, we also need the baobab, which is entrepreneurs with high potential. Thank you very much.
La leçon de storytelling.
Thank you very much, Madame Dikossi. a master of storytelling you are.
Et maintenant, je vais accueillir
I'd like to welcome Bambalo on stage, founder and director of the application PAPS, who will present us this project. Once again, you have 3.5 minutes. You've just raised a lot of funds, and I'm sure you'll do a great job pitching for us. Hello, Station F. I'm here to share with you the mission that my co-founder and myself gave ourselves several years ago. We wanted to create a geolocation tracking solution for deliveries that would allow Africans to improve logistics. This is a story about logistics and warehousing and many other things. Today, PAPS is a company that employs 100 people in Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. We have 150 vehicles, cars and trucks, and we have warehouses in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and elsewhere for facilitating logistics and sending packages for our clients. We work with young entrepreneurs who want to spread their wings wherever they wish. We help give them the infrastructure they need. Let me give you an example. There are a lot of Senegalese people in this room. I bet that by the end of this meeting, during the cocktail session, at least 5 people will be wearing Matidi. Matidi is a brand that's everywhere in Senegal. This brand is now easier than ever to export. Our goal is in this issue. We're trying to encourage intra-African exchange, intra-African trade. We also want to contribute to trade between Africa and Europe. Customs barriers are a major issue between the South and the North, and we believe that we have a role to play in this issue. We'd like to take advantage of the presence of Mr. Emmanuel Macron and Mr. Macky Sall at today's event. Among our clients, we have many big companies like Orange and Suez. Among our investors, we also have Yamaha and American investment funds and Japanese investment funds. But we have an issue that there's no solution to. It's a trade problem. Exchange and trade between our African Francophone spaces and exchange between European spaces, which are also mostly Francophone. What's the issue if we all speak French? Well, in 2050, 70% of Francophones will be in Africa. And the vast majority of these people will be between age 18 and age 30. What we need to do is ensure that this space goes beyond the borders of Senegal. We need to be able to do trade, conduct trade outside of this space. We need to be able to integrate ourselves into any existing platform that can sell to clients. These clients could be in Dakar or in Bordeaux. What we want to do is allow our clients in Africa to sell products to Europe so that you might be able to find African products on your tables, in your restaurants, and elsewhere. That's why I'm here today, and I think that's why DICOC is here today too. We need aid, we need funds. We're here because we want to do business with you. Over the last few years, we've had a lot of difficulty raising funds. We faced a lot of difficulties, but we were able to finally conduct a successful round of funding. And the first round of funding allowed us to attract even more external funding. We just raised 4.5 million USD a few weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we raised $1 more million. Some of these mechanisms are promoted by the AFD, which is fantastic. But sometimes it takes a long time to receive funds for companies like ours. It could take 18 to 24 months. And sometimes that's long enough for a company to die. But these mechanisms are great. I think we should continue with partnerships like this. We should keep talking to entrepreneurs like us so that we can have our feedback be heard. Excuse me, quickly. You're almost out of time.
Je m'en arrêterai là.
Well, I'll stop there in that case.
Oui, j'ai des cartes.
Do you have business cards with you?
Je le répète,
Yes, I brought some.
je suis surtout là pour du business.
But I'm mostly here
Tous
for
ceux qui veulent faire
business.
du business,
Anyone who
transporter,
wants to do business with me,
développer en
do you want to
Afrique.
transport
On est la
things? Do you want to
plateforme.
develop in
Merci à
Africa?
tous.
We're the platform you need. Thank you so much.
Merci Bambalo.
Thank you, Bambalo.
Voilà, ces deux entrepreneurs qui sont
these
donc,
two
vous l'avez
entrepreneurs
compris, soutenus par la délégation générale à
supported by the General Delegation for Rapid Entrepreneurship of Women and Youth of Senegal, whose Deputy Minister is present with us today. Mr. Deputy Minister, I'd like to invite you, as well as the other members of this last workshop, to join me on stage.
Papa Amadou Sarr,
Please come to stage, Papa Amadou Sarr,
délégation générale à l'entrepreneuriat rapide des femmes.
Minister and at the General Delegation for Rapid Entrepreneurship of Women and Youth of Senegal. We have Jean-Michel Severino,
Odile Renaud-Bassou, présidente
Odile Renaud-Bassou,
de la Banque européenne pour
President of
la
the European Bank for Reconstruction and
Development.
Development. Grace Mulisa, Managing Director of EcoBank Uganda.
Development Finance Institutions.
Bruno Wen, Chairman of the European Development Finance Institutions.
GIZ, Management Board and Co-President of the Practitioners Network. Grace Mulisa, who is General Director of EcoBank Uganda. Et pour la Société financière internationale, Sergio Pimenta, qui est Afrique. Nous avons bon espoir que Maktar Diop, le directeur général, nous rejoigne
We also have Maktar Diop with us
cette
today.
table ronde.
We are sure that this roundtable will be very fruitful.
Sur le timing, comme cela.
The reason why I'm so attentive to the timing is because we must finish at 18:45 sharp, 6:45 p.m. sharp. That is the point at which we need to rearrange the room. And we may need to ask those of you who are in the room to get up and move around. We will have to do that at 6:45 p.m. So let me start with you, Papa Amadou Sarr. You are the one who chose the entrepreneurs that we heard from today. Why did you make this choice? Thank you very much. I would like to thank Remy once again. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you for bringing together so many partners. I invited these two entrepreneurs to pitch to you because I think that here around the table, we should be able to mobilize 5 billion euros. Don't you think?
Alors, le choix, il est fait, vous les avez vus.
So, I made my choice. You heard from them.
Financiers, agronomes, il y en a beaucoup dans la salle.
There are many people in this room, many other entrepreneurs who have came to show the new face of Africa, a young, dynamic, entrepreneurial Africa. Like Bambo earlier, he doesn't need aid, he doesn't need help. What he needs is cash. He needs a guarantee. He needs funding. What we need to do is create a mechanism. We need a finance mechanism. We need to use this to show that we believe in Africa and we believe in its young talent. We need to commit financial resources over the long term so that these companies won't die after 1 year or 2. We don't want banks to shun these risks of investing in Africa. There's a lot of potential here. Thank you very much. All right, Jean-Michel Severino, we've just seen two examples that are very encouraging. The support from the General Delegation is obviously a great solution that's helped them get started. Isn't that the key? Support from governments? Yes, absolutely. As Sébastien Treyer said earlier, there will be so many young people in the world by 2035. It's because of this figure that Investisseurs et Partenaires came about. What we're seeing is a demographic change without precedent. It affects Africa and also Europe. It's at the heart of our shared fate. I'm saying this not just because I'm an Italian who grew up in Côte d'Ivoire and has French nationality. No. I'm saying this because I think that this demographic expansion has the keys to our shared destiny, our shared fate. We need to create jobs to meet the demand on behalf of these young people who will need to work. It's entrepreneurs who will provide these jobs. Some of these entrepreneurs haven't been born yet, or they're not on the market yet. They're not working yet. So what we need to do is make sure that this wonderful movement of entrepreneurship can create jobs. It needs to expand the market and meet the challenge. I have two pieces of good news that I would like to share, and two bad pieces of news, unfortunately, and also a challenge. The good news is that these entrepreneurs exist. They're out there. We've just seen two wonderful examples of entrepreneurship in Africa. That is wonderful. There's a whole social movement taking the African continent by storm. It's a macroeconomy, it's a whole demographics. We have a lot of hope. Another piece of good news is that over the last 25 years, through trial and error, we've figured out how to do entrepreneurship. We know how it works. We don't have a magic wand, but we know how to create a whole ecosystem with accelerators, incubators, investment funds, training programs. We know how to create this ecosystem composed of many different actors, which can facilitate the development of more entrepreneurs. Now I have some bad news for you. The first piece of bad news is that the essential part of this, the keystone of this ecosystem, is funding in the form of investment in this network of entrepreneurs. This isn't something that is profitable. That's the bad news. It just isn't profitable via traditional financial mechanisms. This is a challenge for the EDFIs, who have always tried to finance profitable companies on international capital markets. This is unrealistic. We should put this method to rest. We need to say goodbye to this hope. It will never come to life. We've spent too much time on this. The second piece of bad news I have for you is that we don't have what it takes to meet the challenge. Despite all of our attempts, despite all of our innovation, there are a lot of people in this room from the AFD, the European Union, the BUE, many other actors that we've worked with. We do not have what it takes to meet this challenge. The amount we need to mobilize is far greater than what is being invested today. And I'm saying this in all sincerity and with great sadness, that the means we are dedicating to entrepreneurship are so far from being sufficient. And so that leads me to my conclusion, which is the challenge of changing this situation, because we know that we're facing a new social reality. We have this burgeoning entrepreneur class. We know what kind of investment is necessary to scale up and move forward. Here's a challenge. What if we could mobilize 1% of development expenses for Africa, 500 million per year, and dedicate it to this agenda? That's nothing at all. It's a tiny, tiny amount of money. But if we did that, we would quadruple the means that are currently being dedicated to entrepreneurship in Africa. Sorry, I talked about finance. I gave you a lot of figures. I'm sure that everyone knows that the challenges go well beyond these fields. Capacities are at the heart of our agenda, but sometimes figures are what we need to get mobilized. So let's keep this challenge in mind. Let's scale up, take great steps. Let's transform the continent, and like our Anglo-Saxon friends say, let's put your money where your mouth is. Thank you very much, Jean-Michel Severino. So, you've thrown down the gauntlet. I'll turn now to Odile Renaud-Basso. You have experience in North Africa, where you've been operating for 10 years now. Can you tell us how you support small and medium-sized businesses and how this experience could be beneficial to the rest of the continent? Yes, well, we don't work in sub-Saharan Africa for the moment, but we do a lot of work. We've been doing a lot of work for the past 10 years in Northern Africa. For the BERD, sustainable development is at the heart of our mission. 70% of our investment is in Northern Africa and in the private sector. There are four main lessons that we can take from our experiences. First of all, we've learned a lot from the local banking sector. We provide funding to local banks, which themselves finance small and medium-sized businesses. This doesn't totally answer Jean-Michel Severino's question, because these are small and medium-sized businesses already. But our financing allows local banks to take more risks, to better go through the dossiers they receive. And they are able to launch programs, for example, for women, buy-in for women, or they can invest in green energy. So that's the first lesson we can take from this. The second is that we get directly involved with SMEs. I totally agree with Jean-Michel. We do this thanks to donors' money, thanks to the EU, thanks to bilateral funding. This is what allows us to finance these projects and these SMEs. This is what allows us to help them, and they're all at all different stages of development. Some of them are very small businesses where we finance consultants. And I think the first person we saw was speaking about the support they provide to existing companies. So that's one of the things that we help finance. We help them develop HR, import-export capacities. So we help create a local network of consultants. We invest in that. And we also give support to companies, not just in terms of financing, but also in terms of consulting. We give them advice. And we work with our local banking partners to pool risk and provide technical assistance to banks as well, to improve the way that they handle the applications they receive from SMEs. We have a dedicated program called Star Venture for companies with high growth potential. We help get them support through incubator ecosystems and other things. We like focusing on this segment. We also focus on young people. We have a program called Jeunes in Business, Young People in Business. This is to help promote small and medium-sized businesses created by young people. The third lesson we've learned is the importance of local presence. We're not just in capital cities, we also have a presence in medium-sized cities in these different areas so that we can be in touch with local teams, local workers. I think that this local presence is a key element of our success. And the fourth lesson is the importance of partnership with others. We need donors' money. Of course, it's important to partner with donors and also with other bilateral and multilateral institutions. This is absolutely key. I think that the better we can coordinate together, the better we can work together, and the better we can face these major challenges. Thank you very much.
The purpose of this workshop is what works and what doesn't work, how to do so that the necessary funds get to the SMEs who need them. And we continue with this roundtable with Bruno Venn.
As I understand, your network of European development finance institutions have been quite busy over the past 14 months, both in scaling up the commitment of your members and in structuring a more, shall we say, coordinated approach to investments in Africa. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, many thanks. Indeed, in November 2020 here in Paris at the first Finance and Commons Summit, we launched a coalition for recovery of the African private sector with a particular focus on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. We as EDFI, the Association of the 15 European Development Finance Institutes, together with partners that are also here in the room, the African Development Bank, BOAT, the International Development, is the US International Development Finance, FinDev of Canada and others, And we have committed to provide at least $4 billion in US dollars by the end of 2021. I'm extremely proud to tell you that we have achieved 5.55, so 40% more than what we have promised. And in addition, we have provided 23 million euros for services, advisory services, for PMEs, for the small and medium-sized enterprises, but also to the banks. Because we do ignore, to some extent, that the banks are the first entry points for the small and medium-sized enterprises. And if they do not have the right credit technology, if we have heard, and asking a new startup company for a credit history, then it fails right from the beginning. So we have to train them to help them to have the right credit technology and also be ready to finance women entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs. And what I like also to mention is that last year we have seen a record of commitments of EDFI. We reached 9 billion euros and a remarkable change compared with 2020, because 4.1 billion of what we have committed, so it's almost half, went to Africa. And so it's a 1/3 increase, and it's also remarkable that 1.8 euro were gender lens investment, an increase of 70%, and 2.3 billion for small and medium-sized enterprises. So that's also 57% more. What I like also to mention is that all this was only possible by a strong cooperation. Today we have heard a lot of that we need to work together, that we need to partner. But the question is on how. Because we, the institution, need to have effective and efficient cooperation, and the same our clients and our partner countries. Because we tend to be complex, regulation is increasing, because our owners also ask a lot that we have to comply with in terms of ENS requirements, KLM requirements, to know your customer, etc., etc. So this comes at additional transaction costs. Reducing this kind of transaction costs, this is what we have to do. And this is why we in EDFI believe very much that in the Alliance for Entrepreneurship for Africa that was launched yesterday, and I think that Sergio will elaborate a little bit on that this could be an efficient platform for working together in order to provide much more for the missing middle. One final point. What we need are guarantees. Because what has been mentioned here, if we could have guarantees that we can extend to banks so that can take a part of the risk when working together with startups, with women entrepreneurs and others, clients they do not know, that would be helpful. Final point is guarantees. We should not ignore that whatever we are providing as OECD institutions to developing countries is in foreign exchange. So we put a lot of undue burden to the financial intermediary and to the clients. So this is why I would like to use this opportunity also to call to our owners, to donors, to governments, to provide us with these kind of guarantees, because if these guarantees for foreign exchange are not available, then we will not reach out to the majority of the small and medium-sized enterprises in the context of Africa.
Thank you so much. And thank you for answering directly the second question I had in mind, such efficiency. Give me a few seconds, ladies and gentlemen. My fancy device is almost out of battery. So, so I'm going to go back to papers the old-fashioned style. Here we are. And I am going to address my next question to Mrs. Gerner. Hello. I am calling upon you in your capacity of co-president of the Practitioners Network. Now, you bring another major asset to this whole ecosystem, that's technical assistance. How does technical cooperation help to support the financial services? And maybe you have recent wins that you'd like to share with us.
Well, thank you so much, and also thank to Rémi Rioux for the invitation for the Practitioners Network today. And I think it quite fits what I would like to mention to a lot of things we heard before in the workshops, and also what Odile was mentioned and Bruno was mentioned. First of all, the Practitioners Network is a network of partners, technical assistant, experts on the ground, a presence, a local presence, not only in the capitals, but also around our partner countries in Africa. Second, it's quite interesting because we work on all the things which were mentioned before. We heard from the colleague from South Africa that he said our problem often is implementation, how to implement, and capacities, how to build up capacities. We heard from the president of the African Development Bank that there are not enough bankable projects. And the question is how to bridge the gap. And I think this is what we as experts for technical assistance can support the partner countries. And we work with all three parts. That means with the entrepreneurs, that means with the SMEs. We know what they need. We talk with them. We try to support them to find the solutions they need. We work with the financial institutions, sometimes together with the EFDIs. And we work with the governments because we need conducive environment. Without the conducive environment, without the frameworks, without the regulations, we will not be successful. And that is how we work, and we try to bridge the gap between what need SMEs, what need entrepreneurs, what need also the financial institution in working together with the SMEs, and what should be done by the governments, as it was mentioned before, because they are not only observers but also actors. And that's what we can bring in. And if I would like to give you, you asked me for an example. There is, I think, a quite interesting example. It's a program called Get Invest. It's a program from the European Union, Germany, Sweden, Austria, and some other countries. And the idea behind that was how to bring together, on one hand, the investment readiness of the SMEs, of the entrepreneurs, and to link them with the financiers they need for their projects. We discussed about access to power, what they need to be successful. And this is what we can do with this program. And so we brought together about 74 projects and companies with financiers, which represents a projected investment volume of 1.2 billion euro and result in an energy access potential for 50 million people. So I think these are the examples we have to have in mind and bring together with the financiers, with all questions of financing, so that we can bridge the gap.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think we can give us some applause. My question to you, Grace Melissa, for EcoBank, it's going to be a double question, if it's okay with you. The first part of the question is, can you share with us, as a commercial bank, what has changed in your vision of SMEs, MSMEs, that you finance a lot? And the second part of the question would be, what can the major donors do to support you better so that you, in turn, can give these SMEs the support that they need?
Thank you. Well, the SME story on the continent is a very exciting one. I mean, you all just seen the examples, and the entrepreneurial spirit on the continent is I mean, it's alive. And what has been missing for a very long time, of course, is that financing gap. And most of them have struggled as far as access to finance and the cost of financing, access to information, and of course access to markets like you've had. But fast forward, there's quite a lot that has actually been done, and that has changed and shifted the way we approach and the way we work with them. And especially working for EcoBank as a Pan-African bank in about 33 countries on the continent. One of them, of course, in my view, is the inevitable impact that the SMEs have on most of the African countries' GDP. You've had the impact, and I can give an example of where I come from, which is Uganda. In Uganda, 70% of the businesses are SMEs. SMEs contribute about 20% of the GDP. On the other side of the continent, when you go to Nigeria, which is the largest economy by GDP on the continent, you find that SMEs contribute about 48% of the GDP. They make up about 90% of the businesses and employ close to about 84% of the population. So that impact, the impact and the potential to impact the lives and the livelihoods of the population has allowed or informed quite a lot of shift and change within the government policy, within the direct support. You just heard about what is happening in Senegal in terms of supporting the youth. But again, giving examples from where I come from, the government has been very deliberate in terms of creating funds to support the SMEs. One of them, and this looks at most of the sectors that are actually impacting the economy, agriculture is one of them. And there's a very clear support. There's a fund that is supporting agriculture, which is called the Agricultural Credit Fund. There's a fund to support women and the youth, and the latest being the Small Business Recovery Fund that is meant to help lift the SMEs from the impact of the pandemic. So because of the support and the understanding on the government's part, that has helped in terms of the focus and making the SMEs a lot more attractive.
Yes.
The second one, and on the bank's part, for me, is the shift, especially when it comes to product development or the discipline around product development. That for a very long time, we had, off-the-shelf, basic, plain vanilla products that were meant to suit all kinds of SMEs, regardless of what they do and where they come from and at what stage they are. You just had the example again about requiring a guarantee from a startup. So that shift has meant that now we had to step back and understand who are these SMEs. How do we deeply, understand them, support them, and co-create solutions that are relevant to them, solutions that are going to add value to their businesses, and we're more working towards partnering them for growth as opposed to financing them. So that shift in product development has helped. And coupled with that, of course, is the whole strategy around looking at the ecosystems and value chains. That with the focus and the strategy on ecosystems and value chains, you can no longer afford to ignore the SMEs because they make up key players within that value chain when you're going to deal with any of the local or global large corporates. And you find that within that, most of the large corporates, whether global or local, have, and it's impacting their performance. And because it does, they're cognizant of the role of the SMEs and how that impacts their growth and profitability. And in most cases, will actually influence provision of working capital solutions to support that whole value chain. And you look at them in terms of, an ecosystem. The other one is the focus on incubation and training. By most players, whether private or public. That has helped lift the SMEs, understand their businesses, access to information, and they can actually now meaningfully run their businesses. That has helped make them attractive. The last two for me is, one related to that whole incubation, is that they're more organized as groups and across the continent. Because you're talking about SACCOs, which are savings and credit, savings and credit cooperative organizations. Those have helped them organize better, negotiate better, support each other to grow. And finally, of course, and I'll talk about what we need to do more in that space, is the partnerships with the other key players. and the DFIs. So the partnership has introduced credit guarantee schemes, risk sharing initiatives, and those have helped the banks get into spaces or sectors or what you'd call the underserved segments, has allowed them to actually take on more risk that they would otherwise have not taken. So for me, I think that's what has really moved the dial and approach. In terms of what do we need to do, what do we need more of? One of them for me is we need to invest more in incubation and capability building. I think we've talked about that. And it goes without saying that when you do that, you actually see the impact it has on in terms of skill set, in terms of knowledge, in terms of insights. It empowers them to actually get better understanding of their businesses, take on more risks, and gives them more chance to succeed. I have seen that work again in about 8 countries that we have supported as a bank. In Togo, in Chad, in Niger, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and Rwanda. And you can see that they're a totally different group of people in terms of when managing their businesses. The second one is, for me, we need to move away from this standardization approach when we are dealing with most of the SMEs on the continent. Or when we talk about Africa, we just had, when you talk about Europe, there are 27 countries. So there are 54 different countries on the continent that are different stages of development, that operate in different business environment. And what that means is that we need to step back and understand the intricacies around these different SMEs in the different countries for us to be able to meaningfully support them, as opposed to really running from more of an inside, approach based on the policies that are designed. The last one is to support, support them create opportunities or markets so that as they produce, then there is a ready market to take that on. On the continent right now, the vibe is this whole free Africa, trade, inter-trade. But how do we move away from, the example you had, that our tests have moved more to apples as opposed to pineapples and oranges? How do we create market for the pineapples and oranges to ensure that there's sustainable growth? Thank you
so much. Thank you for this very comprehensive view. Je vais me tourner à présent vers
Turning now to you, would you like to briefly react to what you just heard, and how do you think we can reinforce your support to companies like the organizations like EcoBank, and what is your work with African companies? Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me say that it is a great honor. Thank you very much for having invited me and for organizing this highly interesting event. I think a lot has been said. Let me just answer your question and see what else we can do. We have a real challenge today, which is a wonderful challenge. I think there is maybe one thing that has not been said so far, one word that I don't believe I heard. It is the fact that Africa is also going through a pandemic. African SMEs were already struggling, and things have deteriorated for them. When you look at the impact the pandemic has on small companies, it is much bigger. We've surveyed companies in 6 African countries and found that nearly 75% of SMEs in those countries were struggling with cash flow. 2/3 were struggling with sales. Their sales had declined to 2 years before. So we have a demographic challenge, we have a financing challenge, and we had the pandemic, which hit the world, but more specifically SMEs in Africa. So I think time has come to change paradigms. I think we have a collective responsibility to take new approaches, create new approaches. We talked about the Alliance earlier, which is a wonderful initiative to address this, but I think that we can do more. At SFE, we think we can also contribute and do more for SMEs. We are already financing. We finance banks. We have a portfolio of approximately $3 billion US to fund and finance African banks that are exclusively working for SMEs, but I think we can do more. I think we need a much more global, a much more holistic approach of SMEs in Africa. We need to look at the regulatory framework, for example, and we need to see how we can improve the overall business environment. We need to see, and this was discussed in the previous roundtable, we need to look at infrastructures. If you're an African SME, you want to make sure that if you're selling products or services, you want to make sure that you have access to all markets. You need access to standard or classical infrastructures, energy, roads, and so on, but also digital infrastructure. Access to technology and digital is absolutely essential. It is a real revolution for Africa. It certainly is a revolution for the world, but it is a revolution for Africa. I think we also need to address funding questions, long-term financing in local currencies, and financing that is adapted to the needs of African SMEs. When I travel to Africa, when you go to an African market, for example, in Dakar or in Nairobi, and you see small SMEs, family-owned, family-run businesses with 3, 4, 5 employees, as an institution, we must wonder whether we are properly serving them or not. The answer, I'm afraid, is no, we're not. But I think we are all aware of this, and the point, and the pandemic is helping us in that sense. The point is to implement new instruments, blended finance, new instruments, new funding solutions to actually support these small SMEs by reducing the risk a commercial organization is unwilling to take. They ask for all kinds of accounting documents, and most financial organizations don't want to take those risks, and so that's what we are trying to do. Back in May, during the African Financing Summit, we announced 2 initiatives of $1 billion each, one for SMEs, which we're currently deploying, and another one which, and I'll finish with that if you give me one more second. There is another. The other one is an initiative to support trade in Africa, not only traditional trade or commerce between Africa and the rest of the world, but also commerce trade within Africa, especially with the free trade zone, Africa zone. We are really seeing that local African markets are developing. We're seeing that some countries are reaching out to other countries across the African continent, and they need our support. So we think there is a real opportunity there again. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Diop. I saw you arrived. Makhtar Diop, who is the Managing Director of IFC, the International Finance Corporation. Sir, would you like to add anything on this alliance, which is obviously a big step forward? And I will then give the floor to Mr. Severino to wrap up this roundtable. Well, thank you. I really apologize for being late. And thank you so much for explaining what you just did. COP19 is having a huge impact on SMEs as well. And I was just in a meeting to see how we could address the crisis. I think this crisis is an opportunity to change the world, to change Africa. We are all supporting the production sector in Africa. I was just working on projects of 3 new industrial plants in Senegal, Rwanda, and South Africa. We're working with all colleagues, and so once again, we think opportunities have to be seized. SMEs, as we just heard, have been more impacted by the pandemic. SMEs require local people, transportation, and so on. So it had a huge impact. The pandemic had a huge impact on those SMEs. And as some of my colleagues said earlier, I think that the technology sector is essential. The digital gap has a huge impact on companies. And I think that we today have an opportunity to catch up. There is more competition, which means that prices are likely to go down, prices to access to the price of internet, that is. And in 2 years, we will have 300 terabytes of broadband that will be installed in Africa. And this is going to radically change the African geography, and it is going to significantly reduce the costs. Of course, we cannot talk about all these subjects without talking about climate change. We were in Glasgow recently talking about making the value chains greener. One of the big risks is that this may exclude SMEs because they're not necessarily ready for this. So they need our support. They need us to be involved in this transition. There must be new opportunities. There are opportunities. We have to give them the opportunity to invest in those sectors. And we need partnerships. We all work in different segments. We need to support one another. This is why we're working with Jean-Michel and with other people. Let's be modest. Let's be humble. If we don't work synergetically, and if we don't leverage our capabilities, we will never be able to address all the problems. Last but not least, I would like to call upon the African private sector. The African private sector must be involved with the technology transition. There are a lot of foreign investments, including in technology. It is important to see more African investors investing in this sector as well. Young folks, it is a sector with potentially a lot of creativity. So this would be a huge quality step forward. And again, I apologize for coming in late. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you indeed. This is it. This is the end of this round table. I think we have just a few minutes left just to wrap up and maybe draw a few conclusions. Jean-Michel Severino, what do you think? Do you think we have everything we need to now scale up? Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to conclude because we had a lot of very brilliant talks and comments. Instead of drawing a conclusion, if you don't mind, I'm going to share a story with you, which really resonates with me, especially today. It's a story that took place in the Sahel. About 12 years ago, we invested in a company created by a Mauritanian entrepreneur called Sigi Taifu. He created a company called Le Comptoir du Solaire. It was a very small organization, and his objective was to provide water and energy on along the Senegal River on the Mauritanian side. Very difficult to reach territory, very poor, a lot of migrations, a region which was also subject to terrorists, Mauritanian terrorists, namely. We invested 500,000. The company did quite well. They prospered, and they made it possible to provide water and energy to a lot of local populations, which had a huge impact on healthcare, on their livelihoods were changed, living conditions improved. They created jobs, a lot of jobs, indirect and direct jobs. So if we take a step back, can a private investor put 500,000 euros to a company that is operating in an area with jihadists? No. A private investor wouldn't do that, right? So to grow this company and do what we did, we were able to finally work with other investors, but it takes smart entrepreneurship, it takes brilliant minds, it takes capabilities, a great deal of learning. There was a real learning curve. We needed local banks and bankers also have a role to play. So we need people who are willing to put money on the table. We need people who are willing to work on the company's environment. In a sense, what we need is a village, the entire village around it, an ecosystem, and people who are interested in developing, in making a difference. And it's not just about profitability, it's about sustainability first and foremost. And and I'll stop there. Is this really that exceptional? Is it so extraordinary? The answer is no. We do exactly the same thing in Europe for our own companies. KfW in Germany, that's exactly what they do. It's what Caisse des Dépôts and BPI do in France. Exactly the same thing. We do the same thing for our companies. So why can't we do the same thing in Africa? We're doing here. We could make the same efforts, put the same money and the same energy in African companies as in our companies, because at the end of the day, you get the same outcomes. So all this is finally nothing to really write home about. All it takes is a little bit of motivation and execution. That's it.
Thank you so much for your presence and your contributions today.